Everything happened so fast. One moment it was a normal day. The next, a young boy was lying in a hospital bed, hurt badly and scared, whispering words no child should ever have to say. "Mama, he shot me on purpose." Those were the last words that stayed in the room, echoing in hearts and minds as family and neighbors rushed toward the scene. The sound of sirens filled the air, tires screeching, doors slamming, and voices shouting, all blending into a chaotic symphony of fear and urgency. People ran toward the house where it happened, peering through windows, searching for answers, wondering how something so terrible could occur between two children who were supposed to be friends. Nearby, a group of adults stood frozen, some with hands over their mouths, eyes wide open, unable to process what they had just heard. Some whispered, "It can't be real," while others shakily dialed emergency numbers with trembling fingers. Every passing second felt like an hour as someone cradled the injured boy, tears flowing freely, hearts pounding with worry. A helicopter's distant buzz drew closer. Help was on the way. But at that moment, no one knew if this boy, just 9 years old, would make it. The room was thick with fear and confusion. And right in the middle of it all, a 10-year-old stood silently, watched, questioned, and filled with expressions adults struggled to read. Had he really done it? Why? How could something so young become the center of such a frightening event? These questions slammed into everyone's minds with no clear answer. The crowd buzzed with whispers and shock as law enforcement moved in, trying to piece together what happened, who saw what, and who could help untangle the truth from chaos. Emergency workers hurriedly loaded the injured boy into the ambulance. His mother followed, gripping his tiny hand, shouting his name, her voice breaking. Neighbors stepped back, some wiping tears, others hugging each other for comfort. Everything felt surreal, like a nightmare that no one could wake up from. Some people asked if it was an accident. Others whispered about fear, safety, and how a child that young could end up in such a dangerous moment. But there was something more, a question bigger and heavier than all the rest. Was it on purpose? Everyone wanted to know. That's when the truth began to take shape, but even that truth was wrapped in mystery and pain. The injured boy, through tears and fear, had spoken the words that shook the whole community. "Mama, he shot me on purpose." Those words weren't just simple phrases, they were a sudden thunderbolt that changed everything. People around him didn't need to ask what happened. His own voice had said it clearly, in the most raw and innocent way possible. And just as the ambulance door shut, hiding the boy inside, something else happened that made every adult around freeze. The 10-year-old boy who was accused, the one at the center of it all, was taken aside by police officers. His eyes didn't show the usual childish curiosity one might expect. They were distant, quiet, almost cold. Officers spoke softly, trying to ask questions, but the boy barely said a word. Those few replies he offered were short and measured, too calm for such a shocking scene. No one in that moment knew what this meant. Was he scared? Was he guilty? Or were there deeper reasons hidden beneath his silence? These questions stayed in the air as Chapter 1 comes to a close, right at the point where everything is still unfolding, and the real story of how it all began has only just begun to surface. But before we step back to understand how this all started, we have to go back to the beginning, back to a time when these two boys were just friends, living their everyday lives without the weight of tragedy following them like a shadow. Everything has a beginning, even when the ending seems sudden or unfair. To understand this moment, the one that changed lives, we must rewind and see how ordinary moments slowly built up to an unimaginable event. The 9-year-old boy lived in a modest home, surrounded by family who loved him. He played, laughed, and went to school just like any child his age. He had chores, favorite games, and dreams, nothing out of the ordinary. His friends from school often played together after class, riding bikes, tossing balls, and laughing without worries. He liked superheroes, cartoons, and spending time playing outside until the sun dipped below the horizon. The 10-year-old boy, just a year older, lived not far away. He He too had a life full of routines, schoolwork, games, chores, and afternoons with friends. Children in neighborhoods often play together without hesitation, and these two were no exception. They weren't just neighbors, they shared more than just proximity. They shared time together, toys, laughter, and moments of carefree joy. For families around them, they were simply two local boys growing up together, sliding through the early years of childhood with dreams that had nothing to do with guns, shootings, injuries, or hospital beds. But life isn't always simple. Underneath every smile, every conversation, and every ordinary afternoon, there can be things adults don't always see. Sometimes children carry feelings they don't fully understand, and sometimes adults miss what's happening behind those youthful gazes or quiet moments. Looking back now, it's likely that no one saw the signs. No one thought anything like this could happen. After all, these were children. Childhood is supposed to be safe, unbothered, and filled with innocence. Adults around them felt that children should be protected from danger, not exposed to it. Nobody believed they would be standing at a doorstep on a calm afternoon, gripping a phone and calling for help because one child had harmed another. But now, that calm afternoon had changed into something no one could ignore. And just when it seemed like everything made sense, the bigger question hung in the air. How did a gun get into the hands of a 10-year-old? This question was louder than any other, louder than fear, shock, or even the cries that filled the street. The truth was that no one knew how the weapon came to be near these children. Adults searched their memories for signs, clues, moments that might explain what happened. Was it left out accidentally? Did someone forget to lock it away? Or did the child find it somewhere else entirely? People talked in hushed tones, fearful not just for the injured boy, but for the safety of every child in the area. It was a moment that made parents rethink everything: where toys went, where keys were placed, and how quickly innocence can turn into tragedy. This is when doubt and fear settled into the community like a slow, creeping shadow. Every neighbor wondered, could this have been prevented? Every parent asked themselves, did I do enough to protect my own children? Every friend and family member struggled with a simple but heavy truth. Childhood isn't always safe, no matter how much we wish it were. And just when the thoughts began to settle into uneasy quiet, there was another moment, one that would take this story into deeper, darker territory. A few hours after the ambulance rushed away, after the injured boy was taken into emergency care, fighting for his young life, police officers made a decision that stunned the neighborhood. They placed the 10-year-old boy under arrest, not as a suspect in the way adults might be, but as someone who had to face charges under the law, even though he was far too young to really understand the weight of what he was accused of. Neighbors watched from windows, adults whispered amongst themselves. Questions about responsibility, age, childhood, and justice crowded every mind. What does it mean to arrest a child? How does the law treat someone so young? These thoughts twisted through every conversation, every concerned glance, and every worried heartbeat. And just as the officers led the young boy away, eyes quiet, face unreadable, something else happened that changed the direction of everyone's thoughts once again. A neighbor stepped forward, her voice shaking, her eyes fixed on the scene. She asked a simple yet devastating question in a trembling whisper. How could he get that gun at all? The question wasn't just about the weapon. It was about safety, about trust, about whether anyone truly knew what children in their very neighborhood could reach, find, or uncover in a split second. And then the silence fell again, heavy, stable, and full of unknowns. That moment, just when the neighborhood held its breath, is where Chapter 1 ends.
You've heard the shock, you've seen the fear, you've watched innocence slip into danger. But now, the real story, the why, the how, and what happened next is about to unfold. Stay with me for Chapter 2, where we dive deeper into the moments that led up to the shooting, the questions adults are still struggling to answer, and the truths that most people never expected to face. The sun rose the next morning, casting light on the neighborhood still shaken to its core. Streets that had seemed ordinary the day before now felt heavy, filled with whispers and worried glances. Children walked slowly to school, clutching their backpacks, eyes darting around as though the world had suddenly become unpredictable. Parents lingered at corners, hesitant to let their own children go, afraid that the unthinkable could happen again. Inside the police station, the 10-year-old sat quietly, his small frame folded into a chair that felt too big for him. Officers spoke carefully, asking questions he answered in short, measured words. He rarely looked anyone in the eye. Some thought it was fear. Others wondered if it was something darker, a chilling awareness, even at such a young age, that his actions had changed everything. The investigators tried to untangle what had happened, trying to hear every detail from the neighbors, from family members, and from anyone who might have been near the boys in the days leading up to the shooting. Meanwhile, the 9-year-old boy lay in a hospital bed, machines beeping around him, bandages covering wounds that no child should ever have endured. Nurses whispered updates to the mother, explaining each procedure, each risk, and every step toward recovery. The mother held his hand tightly, refusing to let go, her tears falling onto his small arm as she whispered words of comfort. "You're safe now," she told him. "It's gonna be okay." But even she didn't know if okay would ever feel real again. Back at the neighborhood, questions swirled like a storm. How did two boys, so young, come to be in such a dangerous situation? Some adults remembered moments from the past week and conversation overheard, a missing item, a toy replaced too quickly, and wondered if they had missed the signs. Others blamed circumstances beyond anyone's control. An unlocked door, a weapon left in the wrong place, a moment of curiosity that had turned catastrophic. Police investigations began to uncover pieces of the puzzle. They found the handgun that had caused so much damage and began tracing how it ended up near the children. Interviews revealed that the gun was not secured properly, left in a place that should have been off limits. Adults involved admitted to underestimating how easily children could access such dangerous objects. The reality was chilling. What was supposed to be a safe environment had become a trap, one that had devastating consequences. School officials, neighbors, and families gathered to discuss what had happened. Meetings were tense, filled with frustration, anger, and sorrow. Everyone wanted answers, and everyone wanted to prevent it from ever happening again. Yet despite all the questions and discussions, the fear remained. Fear that something so unimaginable could happen anywhere, even in the most familiar settings. Amid the chaos, the 10-year-old remained in a juvenile facility. He was separated from the community, yet news of the incident traveled quickly. Whispers followed him wherever he went. Some feared him, others pitied him, recognizing that a child so young would carry this weight for the rest of his life. Psychologists were called in to speak with him, trying to understand what drove such a tragic action. Was it anger, misunderstanding, curiosity, or something no one could fully explain? For the family of the injured boy, every day was a battle. Recovery was slow, painful, and uncertain. Each hospital visit revealed new challenges, surgeries, treatments, and the emotional toll of surviving something so severe. But the boy fought bravely, gripping onto hope like a lifeline. His mother stayed by his side through every procedure, every moment of fear, and every quiet night filled with uncertainty. Neighbors and community members began to offer support, organizing meal trains, offering rides, and checking in on the family regularly. Despite the tragedy, there were small sparks of humanity, people coming together, trying to make sense of the horror by showing compassion. Yet even these acts of kindness could not erase the lingering questions, the echoes of fear, and the heavy shadow of what had happened. And just as it seemed that the neighborhood began to feel slightly more stable, the story took another shocking turn. Authorities discovered that the 10-year-old had not acted entirely alone. There were signs that he had discussed having access to the gun with someone else, someone older, someone who should have known better. This revelation sent shockwaves through the community, raising new fears and anger. How could a child be influenced in such a dangerous way? Who was responsible, and how much of this tragedy was truly preventable? The mother of the injured boy received a call late one evening. The voice on the other end was solemn, explaining that there might be additional charges brought against the older individual connected to the firearm. She held the phone tightly, shaking, heart pounding, as the weight of legal proceedings, hospital bills, and fear for her child's future all collided at once. A small town that had felt safe just days ago now seemed like a place where danger could hide in plain sight. Meanwhile, the 10-year-old sat quietly in his cell,
facing a reality that no child should ever have to confront. Psychologists asked him questions, but he answered sparingly. Officers tried to get him to explain his actions, but his silence was heavy, filled with the weight of a story only he fully understood. What drove a child to harm another child? What feelings, frustrations, or misunderstandings led to this point? No one could answer completely. At home, the community grappled with the shock of what had happened. Parents questioned their own ability to protect their children. Children whispered among themselves, unsure how to process the news. Everyone feared that the world they once thought safe had changed forever. Just as it seemed that the pieces were slowly starting to come together, the new development shocked the community even more. The injured boy, still recovering in the hospital, revealed something startling to his mother, a detail about the day of the shooting that no one had expected. It was a piece of information that could change the course of the investigation, alter perceptions of guilt, and reveal motivations that were previously hidden. The revelation left everyone speechless, neighbors, officers, and family alike. Questions piled on top of questions. Why hadn't anyone noticed this before? How did it affect the investigation? And most importantly, what would happen next? The answers were not immediate, and the uncertainty hung over the town like a storm cloud. Every new development added more tension, more fear, and more suspense. The story was far from over, and the consequences were only beginning to unfold. And just as the day ended, the police made another announcement, one that would shake the town to its very core. The 10-year-old, already facing charges, might now be connected to events beyond what anyone had imagined. The community's sense of safety, already fragile, fractured even further. The tension in the small Louisiana town had reached a breaking point. Every parent, every neighbor, every friend felt the weight of what had happened, and the questions still outnumbered the answers. The 10-year-old boy remained in the juvenile facility, facing the consequences of actions that no one expected a child so young could commit. The town watched, waited, and whispered, hearts heavy, minds spinning with fear and confusion. Inside the hospital, the 9-year-old boy was slowly waking from the surgeries that had saved his life. Machines beeped steadily around him, and the nurses monitored his every movement. His mother stayed by his side, holding his small hand and whispering encouragement. "You're strong," she said. "You can get through this. We'll get through this together." Though the boy was in pain, he showed glimpses of his old spirit, small smiles, fingers twitching, and a strength that surprised even the doctors. But recovery wasn't just physical. The emotional trauma weighed heavily on him. Questions of trust, fear, and understanding filled his mind. How could a friend do this? Why would someone hurt him so badly? Adults tried to explain, but explanations felt hollow to a child who had nearly lost his life. Each moment of pain was a reminder of the fragility of safety, of how quickly life could change.
As the investigation continued, it became clear that the incident had deeply affected everyone involved. The 10-year-old, though young, faced legal proceedings. Psychologists evaluated him, exploring the motivations behind his actions. Was it impulse? Was it misunderstanding? Was it a cry for attention? Answers were elusive. Even he seemed unsure of why he did it, reflecting the complexity of emotions in children who act violently without fully understanding consequences. Community meetings were held to address concerns, to teach parents about gun safety, and to provide guidance on how to protect children. People shared their stories, fears, and anger. They demanded accountability, safety, and reassurance that something like this would not happen again. The event had left a scar on the town, one that would take years to heal. Then came another shocking revelation. The injured boy, now slightly stronger, recalled a critical detail about the shooting, a moment that had been overlooked. He remembered how the other boy had acted just before the shot, a detail that suggested it was not entirely random, but a decision made in a brief, terrifying moment. This revelation changed the narrative for law enforcement, parents, and even the boys themselves. It highlighted the thin line between accident and intent, a line that had devastating consequences when crossed. As days turned to weeks, the 9-year-old's condition stabilized. Doctors were cautiously optimistic about his recovery,
but there were lasting injuries, reminders of the day that had changed everything. Physical therapy would be long, and emotional healing even longer. His mother stayed close, providing comfort, reassurance, and protection. She worked tirelessly to help him regain strength while also shielding him from media attention and gossip. The 10-year-old faced consequences appropriate for his age: time in a juvenile facility, counseling, and supervised rehabilitation. The legal system had to balance accountability with the understanding that he was still a child, learning about right, wrong, and the weight of actions. It was a delicate, challenging process for everyone involved. Community support grew stronger in response to the tragedy. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers offered assistance, from meal trains to hospital visits. Local organizations held educational workshops about gun safety and conflict resolution for children. The incident had sparked a movement to prevent such tragedies in the future. But the emotional impact lingered. Both boys would carry memories of that day for the rest of their lives. Families grappled with guilt, fear, and questions about how something so horrific could happen in the heart of their community. Children struggled to understand, and adults struggled to explain. The event served as a painful reminder of the fragility of childhood, the dangers of accessible weapons, and the need for constant vigilance. And as night fell over the quiet town, parents hugged their children a little tighter. Neighbors locked doors a little earlier. Everyone remembered the day when innocence collided with tragedy, leaving scars, questions, and a determination to protect the next generation. The story ended with a mixture of hope and sorrow. Hope that the 9-year-old would heal, that the 10-year-old could learn from his actions, and sorrow for the lives that had been forever changed. Yet one question remained, echoing quietly in the minds of all who witnessed the tragedy. Could it have been prevented? And with that, the chilling reminder lingered. Even the smallest choices, the simplest mistakes, and the briefest moments can shape destinies in ways no one could foresee.